Hello and welcome back. In this lesson we're going to be looking at a more sophisticated way of creating symbols by using graphics. And again, as we saw in the last lesson, we first have to open up the Edit Symbols window. We then select New. But this time we're going to change the radio button up the top from character to graphic. And this then allows us to import an image from our computer. And once we have our image, we can then change its size. We can change its position. And we can even change its rotation. Now, I can still remember the first time Sibelius introduced this feature. I was really excited that it had become so easy to create a new symbol. However, I soon realized that there are a couple of additional things that you have to take into account when importing graphics as symbols. And that is that you really have to set up your images properly first. And to show you this, I've got a couple of examples lined up for you. So, the first big thing that you have to take into account is that if your image has a whited out background, this will often get in the way and cover unintentionally over other objects, as we can see in this first example with this JPEG. So the graphics that function best as symbols are graphics that don't have a background, like this one next to it, created from a PNG file, which obviously means that you'll have to fiddle around on some image editing software first. However, there is a simple workaround if your image does have a white background, and that is to simply change the Z index of your image or symbol by selecting it, and in the Appearance tab, clicking Send to Back, which will mean that all of the other score objects will just sit on top of it, so the white background won't cover over anything. However, even then, graphics used as symbols have a tendency to look a bit grainy or pixelated. I've often found that symbols based on graphics often stand out a little bit in the finished product because they don't always appear as smooth and well blended as the other musical objects, and you'll begin to see more pixelation in the image if I zoom in on it, or if I were to resize this image. Music notation software is designed to be very flexible regarding notation size. As you know, sometimes music notation is huge, sometimes it's tiny, and it's for this reason that most images just don't seem to render as smoothly as the other content in a score. So, if you want to use graphics as symbols, optimally you should only use vector graphics, such as SVG files. These graphics essentially map the outline and shape of an image, which means that they can be stretched, reshaped, and resized without losing quality or becoming pixelated in any way. And you'll see that with a vector graphic, like this SVG file here, I can zoom in and out of this object without losing any quality. It looks just like any other symbol in Sibelius. And this is really what we want if we're going to be introducing graphics as symbols into the program, and this is by far the cleanest and most professional way of going about things. So now you're probably thinking, great, but how am I supposed to make an SVG file? Well, for this, you're going to have to use different software. And one of the best programs for the job is Adobe Illustrator, so if you already have it, I would suggest creating your SVG files with that. But I don't expect you to go out and purchase Adobe Illustrator just for this unless you need a heck of a lot of symbols. However, there's a pretty good free downloadable program called Inkscape, which also produces SVG files. You should be able to quite easily download Inkscape from their website, inkscape.org, and I've used this program quite a lot in the past, and it has been more than adequate for producing SVG files for music notation purposes. Now, obviously, because this is a Sibelius tutorial, I'm not going to show you how to create SVG files with Inkscape, but there are, of course, a lot of helpful, simple tutorials online. So, you might think that I'm a bit mad for saying this, but I like to go an additional step further and actually convert my vector graphics to fonts. So normally when we look at a score in Sibelius, almost everything that we're looking at, all of the notes, the different musical objects, the various symbols, are all what we call true type fonts. And this is of course one of the reasons why notation software like Sibelius can be so powerful. Similar to a vector graphic, fonts are based on mathematical data which tells your operating system the contour of each font symbol. Your graphics card then converts that data to an image that looks best on your screen, which again means that they can be resized and reshaped without becoming pixelated or losing image quality. And the extra step of converting a vector graphic to a font isn't actually a very big one. These days there are countless programs out there for creating fonts, even many decent free ones, such as for example FontForge. And in many of these programs you can import a vector image and convert it to a font symbol. The big benefit of converting your vector graphics to fonts is that you can then have multiple symbols stored in just the one font file. And of course, the greatest thing about all of this is that because notation software is mostly just fonts and symbols, if we can then customize our own fonts and our own symbols, there's literally no limit to what we can notate. So I hope that this was helpful and could point you in the right direction, and I'll see you in the next lesson.